Hello, a Vlogger Dome video for Pyrrho, because I've been having some thinkings about his video that tripped the video I made about emotions, and I realise I haven't really dealt properly with what he actually said in his video. I thought the video on emotions was fair enough, but it hasn't really answered what he asked, and maybe I didn't stress the emotions video well enough, because what I was wanting to stress was the two halves of this thing in life that leads to so many confusions when you've got two people. We're having reflections of things, and it's very hard to take things out of the world context that they find themselves in, take a snapshot of them and then describe them, because they're always in flow. And if you can think that they're always in easy flow, that really helps. Emotions are patterns that arise in a human being due to life. They just are a pattern that arises in a human being. That's one side of it. And on this side of it, an equally easy thing happens, that the human being equally easily just recognizes or doesn't happen to recognize. It's like sight. You're either doing it or you don't. It's just not turned on or turned off. It just happens, that easily just recognizes a pattern, as it just automatically and easily just recognizes a tree or recognizes a door. It recognizes grief when it sees it, and equally easily just labels it grief. So there is just an easy arising of grief because of the circumstances, and then on the other side there are the circumstances that make for the recognition of that emotion and the easy labeling of it as grief. So that's showing, hopefully, that that's A and B human being, and then that's got to be taken into consideration with lights and walls and other human beings, and the whole easy interaction that's always going on in total flow. But your question was mainly on, do you strong-willed people not recognize that you are strong-willed people because you are exercising your strong will? And that is just, I think, a bit of a twisted corruption of what I think is going on. The will is arising as a pattern here in A, and you being B are easily just recognizing it as will and equally as easily labeling it as will. That's all that's happening. It's just like everything that's going on. The pattern recognition software spots will like it spots grief, whereas it spots a tree or it spots a door. And it can equally easily label tree, door, grief, will. There's nothing that's pumping out the will, and there's nothing that's pumping out the recognition of grief or will. There's nothing that's pumping out the labeling. Everything is just flowing naturally. Yeah. Now, when you talked about can we not recognize it, it gets a bit hard to talk about. Gary's 4 coloured boxes is an excellent way of talking about it, except we very soon run out of boxes. We can have the green, or let's say the blue girl in the corner, that we could call consciousness, that is doing this recognition somehow of what's flowing out. There is a recognition of what's flowing out. So that's the blue girl in the corner. We can have the red android in the top corner, which is memory. Different things can be put in these different boxes just as explanatory help. But what it comes down to is, as I've expressed to Pyrrho many times before, you are either all of these boxes or you're none of these boxes. If you want to call yourself something, you must call yourself all of them. You're the blue girl that does the consciousness. You're the one that does the memory. You're the one that does making emotions happen. You know, we can call these things whatever we want to call them. And in an argument about whether I should pretend to be sick this afternoon so I can go home from work early, one might come up with that idea and three might have ideas against it. You can't say, one thing I think we have definitely established so far now, the old religious idea of a soul that decides between the three and the one, we know to throw that away. We know to throw the idea of free away, and what we're left with is a 3 against 1 box. And to call yourself the 3 because the 3 have outnumbered the 1 does not really make sense. Because what is the 1 if it's not you as well? Next time it could be a completely, it always will be a completely different configuration of the blue antagonisms. So you can't really say that you're one of these boxes. The only rational thing to say is you're all of these boxes. You just happen to be what your body, what the brain decides. That's the best we can really say is, yes, I am all of what it did, what it's doing, and what it will do. Brackets, ultimately that doesn't make sense either, but for a shorthand where we are up to, it's not bad. Whatever happens, it happens, and that's me. But you and other people will easily come along and say, well, now that you that's done all these things in the past and what you're doing now adds up to me to being an absolute bastard, and easily just labels it. Now, I'll change that to being a really nice chap and just labels it. And that's all it is. But we can't say that I am a strong-willed person or I am not a strong-willed person in the way that we can imagine that there is something exercising that will, which would make that word make sense. But there is no exercising of the will, but we can say, because we're party B, to say that that person seems to be exercising will. That's a pattern I recognise, that's a pattern I can label, and that's a pattern that can make another pattern here arise of pride, that this one is doing willpower or whatever it might be. But it's just an easy flow of patterns arising and being recognised and being labelled. So I was going to make this a longer video, outside actually, but it's a bit too windy, to show you the gazebo that I have made and how the whole idea of designing that came up with. Should it be square? And a very strong idea came, no, if you build it four-sided it'll just look like a shed. I ran into trouble with the joints on the hexagon shape, and an idea arose, well, go back to the square one, that'll be much easier on the angles, and that got nothing, not many boxes went for that at all, so that just never flew at all after it was described by one of the boxes as a shed. I had a brief flirtation with an octagonal shaped one, but that didn't work. So there were strong things that went in. It was not going to be four-sided. Another strong concept, and what made it a strong concept I don't know, was this is not a project to rush. It's about half a day from absolute completion now, with the tiles round, 2 more days to completion, and thousands of hours of thought and effort has been put into it. But the overall concept was don't rush it, it only has to be ready for spring this year. That was a concept that just floated around being a powerful concept. I can't say that I had to make that concept come out every time that I felt like rushing. It just did come out every time I felt like rushing. I don't know why. I don't know why I felt like rushing. I don't know why I felt like bowing to the great concept of don't rush it. I don't force any of these things to happen because there is no me to force them. One of the boxes happens to recognise them arising. It's the blue girl and the consciousness. Just watches them arising, but I don't make any of them arise. But somebody watching me doing all the work on this would say, what a very patient person I am. How diligent I am. But I'm not being diligent. I am not making diligence. But somebody externally can see it, instantly recognise it, and label it as diligent. I'm not doing it. I think where you're up to now, I think you recognise all of these things, and you recognise that will is just like an emotion that arises, and party B sees it as a pattern, or even internally. One of your boxes can see internal things, that's a different coloured box, and can label it as will, or weakness, or sadness, whatever of your own. But I think you've recognised now that you can't make will happen. It just is a pattern that arises in you that you can label and other people can label. And I think we've got to the point now, Pyrrho, have we not, where all we can say is there an advantage or is there not an advantage to recognising that there is no me here to exercise a will over things like emotions? Is there any advantage to this? What I can say certainly is there is no disadvantage to this. For me, people will have seen the start to where I am now with the gazebo building. At the start of the gazebo building, thoughts would arise here that there are no free will things happening here. There's no willing going on here. All there is the blue girl watching the thoughts arise, watching the work being done, watching the idea that don't rush it, there's no rush, we only have to be ready for spring 2012, don't rush, all this arises, it's watched, it's seen. And as I say, people would think I was very diligent and patient and careful in the construction. All of this time I would not have any thoughts at all that I had free will or any will at all. If there was anything going on, there was just an extra stress, I would imagine, to other people, that the girl in the blue was watching more than other thoughts were just nagging on, which I think happened in other people. But the work got done diligently and well. There was absolutely no advantage at all for me exercising will to do it diligently. It just happened. So I can certainly say there is no disadvantage from having ideas arise that the human pattern recognition unit has no free will and it has no ability to exercise will. These things happen. And seemingly of no advantage or disadvantage to me so far. But I think it would be a very good next step in the conversation to take that to where I think you would like it to go. Would there be, or where Gary would join in, the meme of free will or will, no, forget that, I think everyone knows to forget the free, of having willpower, of exercising willpower, of exercising ourselves to do good in the world, or whatever it might be. For if we wanted a project done, not just building a gazebo, but building a beautiful world, for instance, would there be an advantage or disadvantage for telling people that they have will, or telling people that they don't have will? I think we can genuinely discuss that, but my opening comment here is personally, and I would think for the people around me watching over the last year of me patiently making it a very nice gazebo, it hasn't pulled back that project in any way, shape or form. I function extremely efficiently with no idea that I have willpower at all. It might be necessary to get other people to do other things I wouldn't like to say, but I wouldn't mind at all discussing it with you and anybody else that wants to. Bye.